Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom, welcome back to today's Daf, which is Eruvin Daf Nun. We are 9 lines from the top. Says the Gemara, Gufa, we just learned in connection with the Machlekes Rabbi Shmuel, in a case where a person's on the road, it's about to get dark, Shabbos is coming, so he makes the following announcement. He's familiar with a tree out in the distance, so he says, my Mokum Shvisa, my Shabbos residence, should be implemented underneath that tree. Now, he didn't specify where exactly underneath that wide tree he'd like to activate his Mokum Shvisa. Shmuel says, even so, it works. We just don't know where exactly his Shvisa is going to be, so you must take all factors into consideration as we learned yesterday. Rav says, he didn't specify where, it doesn't work. He has no Shvisa at all underneath that tree. The Gemara gave us 2 reasons for Rav Shita. Number 1, because an unspecified Mokum Shvisa is worthless. It's ineffective. You have to know where you're living. The second shot was, in the name of Rabbah, that we apply the formula of Kol she'enoi b'zeh chazeh, afilu b'vachsachas nami enoi. Meaning, when something can be done incrementally, consecutively, like in this case, a person only has 1 shvisa of 4 amas. He couldn't say, well, I'd like to have 4 amas on this side of the tree, and then add another shvisa on the other side for another 4 amas. You can't do that. It's einoi b'zeh chazeh. He only has 1 opportunity, 1 shvisa, 1 4 amas. So since it can't be done consecutively, b'zeh chazeh, likewise, even if he should choose to say, well, I'd like the whole entire area to be activated as my Mokum Shvisa, to supply me with 4 amas, but he's activating the whole entire area, which is larger than 4 amas, he can't do that. So, just as you can't do it incrementally, you can't do it simultaneously. Afilu b'vasachas einoi. Says the Mogufa, so we just learned the formula presented by Rabbah. Amar Rabbah, kol davar she'einu b'zeh chazeh. Anything that can't be done one after the other, incrementally, consecutively, afilu b'vasachas einoi. Likewise, it can't be done even if he chooses to do it all at once. Says the Gemara, we have 3 questions, 3 challenges from different places which seem to put this formula into question. Eisvei Abai l'Rabba, Rabbi Bryce as follows. Harmar b'masris. If one should choose to add to his ma'aserishin, it's meant to be 10% of the total, he's going to separate 20%. So what happens? Peiroisav misukanan. The leftover fruit is okay. It's edible because the mice has been separated. So he has 100 kernels of wheat. He separates 20 instead of 10. So the 80 is fine. You can eat them. However, the masa that he separated, the 20%, is mekukal. It's ruined. There's confusion there. Why? Because only a portion of it is really maser. You cannot choose to add to the maser which is meant to be 10%. It's not like truma where you have a choice of how much you'd like to separate. Maser is specific to 10%. Maser means it's a tenth, eser. So the maser that he separated here contains 2 elements. It has legitimate maser. A part of it is the 10% on the remaining kernels, the remaining 80. But anything above that is really tevel, because he wanted it to be maser, and it can't. It can't take effect. It can't be activated as maser. Now, he didn't separate any maser on that extra portion above that 10%. He didn't address it, so it remains tevel. So he has these 20 kernels which are partly maser and partly tevel. So that's what the Brisa means. Masresa mikol kol. It's ruined. There's confusion here. It's a mixture of tevel and maser. But in any event, we see that the legitimate portion of maser was activated, meaning within this 20%, part of it, the part which is meant to be maser on the rest of the 80, the 10% on that, is maser rishon. How does that work? According to Rabbah's formula, if something can't work consecutively, if you can't say, well, 10% and then add another 10%, that certainly doesn't work. So how would it work? Just because he did it all at once. He took a large portion and says, this entire thing should be maser. How does it get activated as maser? Even a portion of it shouldn't work. None of it should work. Says the Gemara, Amai, why is there any maser whatsoever here? Lema, why shouldn't we apply the rule of kol she'eina b'zeh chazeh? Something which can't be done one after the other. You can't take off 10% and then add another 10%. If that's the case, afilu b'vasachas einai. It shouldn't work even if it's done all at once. Let's see Rashi, 14 lines from the top. It says Rashi, harmar b'memasris. He adds above and beyond the requirement of maser. So instead of 1 of 10, he does echad mechamesh, 1 of 5, which is 20%, oy meches, 1 of 8. So what happens? Peroisav shetzilak tzalachar, the leftover kernels, chulim sekonhem, they're okay, they're edible. Because somewhere within this 20%, you have maser separated on behalf of the rest there. Aval ha-masris, shenoisin l'levi mekukolhem. However, the maser you're giving to the Levi, meaning this 20%, is totally ruined. Shari tevel mu'urben, because inside here you have a mixture of maser and tevel. Shekish shenosan kava shmini, loichal shem ha-maser, el ha'alaroi l'maser. Because when you took out 1 of 8, which is too much, the name maser, the status, the maser status, only gets applied to a portion of it, which is the 10% of the remainder. But the rest, anything above that 10% portion, bashar tevelu, it remains tevel, it remains in place. It doesn't change status. The maser behedya rachmana. Shir echad maser, Torah specifically tells us it's meant to be maser, which means 1 of 10. You can't choose to add to your maser. Truma. It's different than truma. Shouldn't tell us by yofe, by roa, by beinis. You can separate with a generous eye, stingy, average. You can do what you want. But truma like ksiv bashir, Torah doesn't stipulate a specific amount. Maser has a share of 1 of 10. But in any case, the 10% does work. The portion which is meant to be 10% on the rest is considered to be maser. Amai, why? Piroisim is zakon. Why is the remainder edible? Why do we say that the maser has taken effect? Neima kol she'ena b'zeh chazeh. If you can't do it step by step, then it can't be done simultaneously. De'ila have a mafresh maser kil chassid. Suppose he separated 10%. V'hadar shakal su. Then he adds some more b'karya leshem meiser, and he considered it maser. Al chulin sheniskun kvar. He added more maser on the remainder. Lechayla leshem maser. So if he already took 10, and then he adds another 10% to be maser on the leftover portion, which is already now edible, it doesn't work. So since it can be done incrementally, hashtanami here as well. Ki afrish haytifina ima maser. When he added. He did it all at once, but he added to the 10%. The status of maser should not be applied to anything. Just as you said by shvisa. Why doesn't it work? We don't say that he acquires 4 ames of shvisa amongst that large area, amongst the 8 ames there. If he hadn't said specifically, I want 4, like the Gemara earlier told us, if he specifically says, I only want 4 out of 8, all agree that it works. But otherwise, if he just says, look, my shvisa is going to be implemented on that huge area, we don't say, well, let him at least get 4, because he's applying shvisa to a huge area. You can't, just as you can't say, I want 4 and another 4, you can't apply your shvisa to an area of 8, even if you're doing it all at once. So what's the difference between our sugya of shvisa, that it doesn't work, in contrast with maser, that it gets activated, even in such a case? Let's go back to the Gemara. Says the Gemara, you know what the answer is? Shani maser. Maser is different. Because if you'd like, he can go ahead and make each kernel half maser. Di omar tigdish palga dechitza. Should he say, well, each kernel, I'd like only half of it. Half of that wheat kernel should become maser rishon. Would it work? Sure, kacha. It's kaddish, meaning it works. Likewise here, says the Gemara, true, he can't do more than 10%, but when he takes 20%, he says, I'd like this to be maser. We accept that statement and we implement it as though he would have said, look, I'd like this 20% to be half. Each kernel should be half maser and half chulin. So that's how we get some maser here. You're right. You can't just spread the maser throughout the 20%. You can take 10% and distribute that 10% throughout the 20%, making each kernel, half maser and half not. So again, since he can go ahead and do half maser, each kernel half maser, half not, so theoretically the maser can be applied to the entire volume, entire 20%. Should he say that only half of each kernel should be maser? So that's how we apply it. We accept his statement, we apply it throughout the 20%. We're using this formula, half on, half off. Each kernel is half maser and half not. So we have half tevel and half maser. So that's why the Brisa says, well, the leftover, the 80-day left behind, is certainly okay, because 10% is certainly legitimate maser rishon. So within this 20%, whatever is meant to be 10% on the remainder is certainly activated. The rest of it remains tevel, meaning each kernel has a portion of it which is maser rishon on the remainder, and a portion of it which remains unattended to, remains tevel. This is in contrast with shvisa. We can't say, well, take a look at this entire area underneath the tree. I'd like my 4 amas to be distributed throughout the area there. I want every amma to be half shvisa, half not. You can't do that. The 4 amas of your shvisa needs to be together. 1 unit of 4 amas. So this concept doesn't apply there, and therefore the shvisa doesn't work. Continues the Gemara. Vari masa behim, the less lechatzoim. We have another kasha, because we know that masa behima, which is the 10th of his group of animals, every 10 animals are going to be masa behima, karban, beis hamikdash. So masa behima cannot be implemented halfway. Less lechatzoim. It's an animal. Either it's kaddish or not. You can't say, well, half the animal will be a karban. So the concept that applies to the wheat won't apply here. Okay? In addition, the Bach adds, v'lesei b'zeh chazeh. Certainly, it doesn't work incrementally. You can't do it one and then another one. The 10th one is masa behema, no more. So once you've designated the 10th one as masa behema, you can't add another one. Having said that, we find v'amar Rava yotzu shnayim ba'asiri. Despite the fact that you can't do it b'zeh chazeh, however, if 2 animals come out at once, he's counting his animals coming out of the pen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When it gets to 10, not 1 came out, rather 2 popped out at once, simultaneously. Yotzu shnayim ba'asiri v'kar nasiri. And he numbered them pen, on both of them. So what happens? Asir v'achad asar, uravin zebezeh. Both of them become kaddish. We're going to see soon in the Gemara, there's a concept of a multiple kedusha when it comes to masa behema. One will be the true masa behema, true karban. The next one will have a limited form of kedusha, like a kedusha of a shlamim. Learn it from a pasuk. So, Rabbi tells us when 2 come out at once, there's going to be kedusha here. Masa behema is activated, is applied here. Not only that, both of them will have some form of kedusha. One of them will be the true masa behema. The other one will be kaddish bekedusha shlamim. There's some differences between the hakrava of a masa behema, hakrava of a shlamim. But in any case, we see that the kedusha of masa behema does get applied, even when we have 2 coming out at once. Despite the fact that should he choose to do it b'zeh chazeh, one after the other, it wouldn't work. Once he has the 10th as masa behema, he can't add an 11th. So despite that fact, but if they come out together, simultaneously they become kaddish. Both of them are kaddish. There's a multiple kedusha here. And the masa behema is activated. How does that work? Don't we know that if something can be done b'zeh chazeh, You can't do Masa Behema and another Masa Behema. B'vasachas also einoi. It doesn't work, even if it's done all at once. So we have a kasha on Rabba's formula. Says the Gemara, here's different. Shani Masa Behema. The isse bezeh chazeh b'tois. We find a halacha that there is a concept of one after the other. If it does it inadvertently, as we're going to see in the Mishnah, there is a possibility of a multiple kedusha. Even when it's not done simultaneously, even when he does it one after the other, they both will have kedusha. If that's the case, then that justifies Rava's halacha. Therefore, in the case when they both came out together, the same type of kedusha will be activated. One will be the Masa Behema, one will be the Shlom. We just don't know which one. But in any case, the kedusha will be applied. What halacha are we speaking about? The Snam. Kara l'tshi asiri. So he's counting his animals coming out of the doorway there. When it gets to number 9, he inadvertently labels it 10. V'la asiri tashi. The next one, which is the legitimate 10th one, he calls it number 9. V'la chadasa asiri. And when he got to the 11th, he mistakenly thought this was the 10th. So he called it number 10. So he made a triple mistake here. The 9th one, he thought it was the 10th. The 10th one, he called the 9th. The 11th, he called the 10th. Shloshta mekudashin. All three have kedusha. So one of them, the true 10th one, will be the Masa Behema. The other one will have different types of kedusha, limited forms of kedusha, like a shlomim. And we learn this from a pasuk. So if that's the case, says the Gemara, we see that the concept of kedusha b'zeh chazeh, because here it wasn't simultaneous, it was consecutively. It was one, and then another one, then another one, will be applied. So even though Masa Behema is really only one, it's meant to be the 10th. The Torah tells us that the kedusha of Masa Behema can stretch, can extend to the 9th, can extend to the 11th in certain circumstances. In the case of a Torah, such as we described. So since we find the concept of multiple kedusha by Masa Behema, that explains Rabba's halach. There is b'zeh chazeh, and therefore there is v'vasachas as well. If two come out at the 10th point of number 10, two come out, they both will have a kedusha similar to this halacha that we just mentioned in the Mishnah. One will be the Masa Behema, one will be the Shlomim. So the Shlomim sort of gets a kedusha, the kedusha extends over from the Masa Behema onto the next one as well, and he becomes kaddish v'kedusha Shlomim. So this is not a contradiction to Rabba's formula, because here we have b'zeh chazeh, and therefore we have v'vasachas as well. Continues the Gemara with a third raya, a kasha to Rabba's formula. Hari toida. What about the carbon toida that requires 40 chales? The lesser b'tois. Over there, the concept of tois doesn't exist. If a person mistakenly, inadvertently made a kedusha, we know that hegdesh b'tos doesn't work. So that's out. You don't have the tois like you have Masa Behema. V'lesa b'zeh chazeh. And you don't have b'zeh chazeh either. Meaning, if he brings 40 chalis, makes them kaddish, designates it for his carbon toida, and decides to bring another 40 chalis, that won't work. So, based on this introduction, you would think that it won't work v'asachas either. But we learned otherwise. V'itmar. Toida shenishchata al shmoinim chalis. He takes his carbon toida and shechts it, having in mind to be mekadesh, the shechita is mekadesh alechem, to sanctify 80 chalis, no less than 80. Chizki Amar, kadshu, Allah mem mitach shmoinim. 40 out of that 80 will become kaddish and attribute themselves to this carbon. So he gets 40. So even though he's bringing 80, it's too large of a number of chalis that are required here. It's like making the shvisa underneath that large tree. Nevertheless, we say that 40 become kaddish. It works. This will be the kasha. That's Chizki's opinion. You won't have 40 that are going to be kaddish on account of the carbon. Nothing happens. Why? Because too many chalis here. And it's unsuitable for his toida. So, but Chizki holds it works. And Chizki was Rabbi Yehuda's Rabbi. We assume the halacha was meant to follow Chizki. So if according to Chizkiah, the fact that he did it all at once legitimizes it, so this is a kasha Rabbah. Says the Gemara Tomorrow law, but haven't we learned what is the pshat in this machlekes? Amar Rab Zera. Hakol Maidim all will agree, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree. Hechad Amar l'kasha arbaim teich shmeinim. He's shechting his carbon. He says, "Look, I only want 40 really out of these 80. All agree to kachi that it's going to work. Why? Because he's specifically saying, I don't want the kedusha to be implemented in all 80. I want to have 40, which I'm going to choose later. Only 40 out of the 80 should become kaddish. All agree. There's no problem here because he's not enlarging his carbon. He's limiting it to 40. So Rabbi Yehuda would agree that's fine. What about the next case? He checks his carbon. He says, "Lo yikatru arbaim ela im kain kaddish shmeinim." I won't allow 40 to become kaddish unless all 80 become kaddish. All agree it doesn't work. Kuli alma le pligi le kaddish. All agree there's no kedusha. Why? Based on Rabbah's concept. Just as you can't do it incrementally, you can't do 40 and then add another 40. Right? Once you make 40 kaddish, you can't say, okay, I want another 40. Likewise, you can't implement that kedusha on the entire 80 even all at once. Why? Kol she'ena b'zeh chazeh v'asach hasena. So all agree to that. So when then is there machlekes? In the following case, ki pligi b'stama. The disagreement between Chizkiah and Rabbi Yehuda is where he didn't specify. He just took the 80, brought it over to the carbon, shechted the carbon. The question is, how do we relate to this? What's in his mind? Mar Savar, Chizkiah says 40 should be okay. Why? Because he never really intended on enlarging his carbon to 80. He simply wanted to bring some extra as a backup for the 40. Mar Savar lachrayis kamachavan. He just wanted to guarantee the safety of his 40, to make sure he has 40 kosher chalis. He bought them conditionally. They're there just to serve as a backup, to secure his 40 chalis. He never really wanted more than 40 to become kaddish. Therefore it works. That's fine. He's only being kaddish 40. Omar Sava, which Rabbi Yehuda holds, the carbon god will come mechavan. His intention is to bring a large sized carbon. He can't do that. He can't bring more than 40. And therefore it doesn't work. So the Kash is answered. All agree to Rabbah's formula. You can't do it b'zeh chazeh. You can't do it v'asachas. Why does Chizkiah maintain that when somebody comes along with 80 chalis, 40 become kaddish? Because that's all he had in mind to be a kaddish. He didn't have a mind to apply kedusha to more than 40. He brought the extra ones just to safeguard the safety of his 40, just in case they become tummy, become puzzle. Therefore, it's just a standard carbon of 40 chalis, and therefore it works. So in summary, we had 3 cases where we seemed to have found something to work in a larger amount than is mandated because it was done simultaneously. And this was a kasha. This put Rabbah's formula in question. Number 1 was the marbe of masers. He separated 20% of maserisha instead of 10. The Brisa says it works to the extent that the leftover food becomes mutter. The mash has been activated, but within this large amount of maser, he has confusion. He has a mixture of maser and tevel. The question was, why does the maser become activated to begin with? When he did it on a larger amount than necessary? The answer is because we apply his statement partially. We say, since you can go ahead and take one kernel and say half is maser, half is not, so this 20% that he separated is implemented in this manner. We say, well, your 10% is the only thing that works, but it's been distributed throughout this 20%. We had a kasha from the halacha b'maser behema. Rabbi tells us if 2 behemoths come out at once, ba'asiri, as number 10, both are kaddish. How could both be kaddish? You can't make double maser. Torah says you can. We have a case where if a person mixes things up, he gets a multiple kedusha. So the concept of b'zeh chazeh will apply by maser behema, therefore it works with vasachas. We concluded with the case of the toida that was nishchat with 80 chalis. Chizkiah says 40 become kaddish. Why? If you can't make kedusha on 80, on 40 and then 40, how can you make Kedusha on the entire 80? Teretz is. He's not trying to make Kedusha on more than 40. The rest is merely lachrayis, al tanai. It's merely coming to back up to secure the 40 chalis. Continues the Gemara. So let's get back to the machlekes. In the case where, from a distance, he announces, I'd like my shvisa to be implemented underneath that large-sized tree. Shmuel says it works. Rav says it doesn't. We had one of the reasons because he didn't specify, he didn't define where he'd like to have his makom shvisa. He didn't know where you're living. If it's unspecified, undefined, Rav holds it doesn't work. The Gemara will tell us there's a case where Rav would agree to Shmuel that it works. And conversely, there's a case where Shmuel would agree to Rav that it doesn't work. That's what Amar Abai, lo yishanu. Rav's concern. Rav says, well, you didn't specify, it doesn't work. That's only Ela Be'ilan Shetachta B'Yud Beis Amma. We have a tree which is, for instance, 12 amas wide. And we don't know where underneath that tree his makom shvisa is. Which 4 amas? The right ones, the middle ones, the left ones, so it's unspecified, it doesn't work. Aval Be'ilan Shein Tachta B'Yud Beis Amma. But if the tree doesn't have 12 amas, it's only, for instance, 11 amas wide. In this case, it would work even according to Rav. Hari miktas beis nikar. Part of his home is recognizable, is defined. What does this mean? Abai is saying like this. We assume that underneath that tree, it's the middle 4 amas that are designated to be his bayis, his place of residence. Perhaps it's near the trunk of the tree. It's the middle ones that are meant to be his house, his makom shvisa. So if the entire width of that tree is only 11, so although we don't know which 4 are meant to be his makom shvisa, the right, the middle, the left, but one thing is for certain, that wherever his 4 amas are, they include at least partially something of the middle 4 amas, right? They all overlap. So wherever the 4 amas are, whether it's the middle, and certainly it's the middle, if it's the right or the left, they overlap somewhat. Those middle 4 amas. So since we know with certainty that he was kaina, he acquired at least partially, at least a portion of those middle 4 amas, which are meant to be his makom shvisa, designated for him. Since we know that with certainty, then that addresses our concern. That makom shvisa is defined. You know with certainty that at least part of those 4 amas were acquired by him. Therefore, even according to Rav, this type of shvisa will be activated. Rav says he didn't define. Well, in this case, he did define. We know positively that at least part of that middle 4 amas has been used for the makom shvisa. That's enough to consider it a specified and defined makom shvisa. Maskefla Rav Huna Ber Davishua. Why are you focusing on the middle 4? Who says those amas have been designated as his makom shvisa? Who says that the middle 4 amas have been designated as his makom shvisa, as the ones that are meant to be his home? Perhaps it's the 4 on the right side, or the 4 on the other side. Kamasayim are meant to be designated for him. So he's challenging Abaye's reasoning here. Abaye is saying, look, the middle 4 are the ones designated for him, and we know it's certainly that at least part of those middle 4 he had acquired. So you know that he acquired part of that bias. So it's a specified makom shvisa. Rav Huna says, who says those middle 4 are any better than everything else? Bottom line is, we don't know where his 4 amas are, right, middle, or left. That's considered to be undefined, unspecified makom shvisa. Ella amar Rav Huna ber Yeshua. When we speak about Rav agreeing to Shmuel, it's going to be in the following case. Lo yishanu. Rav's concern only applies Ella be'ilan shetachta b'ches amas. We have a tree which is 8 amas wide, so you don't know if it's 4 amas on the right or on the left. You have a problem. It's undefined. Avo be'ilan shetachta zayin amas. But if the tree is merely 7 amas wide, hare miktsas beisay nikar. In this case, you have addressed the problem. Why? Because either or, whether it's on the right or on the left, you know one thing with certainty. The middle amma has been acquired as his makom shvisa. So since you know with certainty that at least you know you can pinpoint part of the makom shvisa, a portion of his dalad amis has been very much defined and specified, that's called siyam asri. He has designated and specified his location. So although we don't know about the rest of the 4 amis, we don't know whether it's extending to the right or to the left, but we know for sure that it begins right in the middle. So since you've specified at least a portion of those dalad amis, that's called miktsas beisay nikar. A portion of his home, portion of his residence has been defined and pinpointed that is sufficient to activate the makom shvisa. Let's see Rashi inside, which is about 22 lines from the top. It says Rashi, ches amis. The concern is only when it's 8 amis. In that case, it's undefined. You don't know where to turn. You can say, well, the 4 amis on the right side or on the other side, and there's no designation here. So that creates a concern. But the entire area is merely 7 amas wide. In this case, you're okay. Certainly, a portion of his dalad amis, of his makom shvisa, has been defined and discerned. It can't be, it's impossible to go without it. It can't be that you haven't chosen that middle amma, because whether it's the right 4 amas or the left 4 amas, you've included that middle amma in his makom shvisa. So it says Rashi, okay, if you chose the middle 4, if those 4 turns out to be a makom shvisa, harahi mehen, so that middle amma is not included. If it's from this side or that side, harahi mehen, the middle amma is also included. So whichever way you turn, any option that you choose, right, middle, or left, you have included at least that middle amma in your makom shvisa. So it's been defined, it's been specified. Hilkach kana shambayis. Therefore we say, he was kaina bayis there, his makom shvisa has been activated. Rashi just means to add that at the end of the day, we don't really know which side to turn, which 4 amas, was it the right or the left. So when it comes to establishing the tchum territory, we must take into account all possibilities. Perhaps the 4 amas was to the right, so you have to calculate the 2,000 amma, taking that into consideration, or if it's on the left side, you have to count that way, as we discussed yesterday. But the point here is that this will address Rav's concern. It's undefined, unspecified. In this case, if at least part of that dalad amis has been clearly pointed to, clearly defined, clearly discovered, that addresses the concern. That becomes a defined makom shvisa. Regarding the rest of the 4 amas, okay, we're unsure which way to go, and we're going to have to address that when we go ahead and we calculate the territory. So we have one case where Rav agrees to Shmuel, in the case where at least miktsas beisay nikar, part of the home, has been specified. Continues the Gemara, the first wide line. Tanika vasei the Rav, Tanika vasei the Shmuel. We have a brayso in support of Rav, who holds that when his shvisa has been unspecified, then he has nothing. Not only didn't he acquire shvisa over there, but he doesn't have shvisa in his present location either. As Rashi explained for us in the beginning of the sugya, he never wanted to become your shvisa here. He wanted to become your shvisa there. So if that doesn't work, then he has nothing. He has to remain within his 4 amas. We're going to have a right from a brayso to Rav. Tanika say to Shmuel, likewise, a right from a brayso to Shmuel, that when there is an uncertain shvisa, we don't know where, something does take effect. Tanika say the Rav, we have a raya to Rav on the brayso. Misha ba b'derech, person's on the road, b'chash chaloi, it's getting dark. But Yamaki ilun goder, and he knows about a landmark, a tree, a fence. V'omar shvisasi tachta. He announces, my shvisa should be underneath that tree, at the base of that wall. It didn't specify where. Le'emar klum, it's ineffective. Avalim omar shvisasi makam ploni. However, if he pinpoints exactly where shvisa should be, which 4 amas, that works. Mahalech asher magil isamokim, he can walk up until that place, if it's within 2,000. Higil isamokim, if he arrives there, mahalech kulei, he can walk throughout the entire area. So if it's an enclosed partitioned area, it's regarded like Daled Amas, since that's his Makam Shvisa. So even if it's a place large in size, it's considered merely like 4 Amas. It doesn't get deducted from the 2,000. Malach is Kula, he can walk through the entire area, and beyond that 2,000. But Medvam Amurim, when is it said? Makam Amasuyim. When his Makam Shvisa is defined, an enclosed area. Kigoin Sheshavas Betel. For instance, he established a shvisa on a mound, which is 10 tfachim high. The fact that it's elevated 10 tfachim creates a machitza. So that's considered to be an enclosed area. And how large in size is that area? The surface area is anywhere from dalad amas, because if it's less than dalad amas, then certainly you can walk throughout the entire area. There's no chiddush there. So if it's anywhere from 4 amas till 2 sa, how do we get to 2 sa? Because even though it's an enclosed area, but it's not been partitioned l'shem dira. It's not a residential enclosure. And we know that if it's an unresidential enclosure, the maximum size allowance is an area of 2 sa, where you can plant 2 sa, which is 100 amas by 50, which is equivalent to the shir of the Chatzar Mishkan, which has been established by the Chachamim as the appropriate size for an area which has not been enclosed for residential purposes. It's still considered small enough to be considered a place designated for personal use. It's not like an open, unenclosed area like a carmelis. In any case, this is the formula that we're working here. If it's between 4 amas and 2 sa, that entire enclosure is considered like a Makam Shvisa and regarded like one single unit, like 4 amas. And he begins calculating his tchum of 2,000 from outside that area. So this is regarding an elevated surface, a tail. Likewise, if he established a shvisa in a valley, shia mukayud, which is 10 tefachim deep, surrounded by mechitzes, the same thing will apply v'himadalad amis, a base of sign, which has a surface space anywhere from 4 amis till 2 sa. We regard it as one single unit, and we treat it like 4 amis. But if this space, this location, is not mesuyim, it's not partitioned, it's not surrounded by mechitzes, then he only has 4 amis. So that location becomes his makam shvisa, those 4 amis, and he begins calculating from there 2,000 amis beyond. Let's say we have 2 people walking along. Echad maker. One of them is familiar with a tree out in the distance. He knows about that landmark that exists. The other fellow is not familiar. So he can't announce, well, my shvisa underneath a tree, which he's not familiar with. So what happens? The one that's unfamiliar, he delegates his shvisa to his friend, who's aware and familiar with that landmark. Rashi later says that he tells the other fellow, shvisasi imach, I'm becoming subordinate to you. My shvisa is going to be attached to your shvisa. So by doing so, he enables his friend to make shvisa on behalf of him as well. Makir, the one who is familiar, Omer shvisasi, or there's a gersa shvisa seinu, our shvisa should be b'maka in pleni, in that specific location. Continues the brayso, and this is what pertains to us. When is it said? When he has designated those 4 amas that he has established for his makam shvisa. But if he hadn't designated the 4 amas which he'd like to establish to activate his makam shvisa, he can't budge from where he's standing. He only has 4 amas. And this is right to Rav. when a person attempts to activate a shvisa in a undefined manner, nothing works. He doesn't get there, and he doesn't have here. Shmuel is going to be a refutation on Shmuel, who maintains that even an unknown shvisa will be activated. Shmuel will respond, this is a unique case. Even in this case, even I would agree it doesn't work. You know what we're speaking about? See, Shmuel was speaking where he's on the road and he has a certain tree in mind. He wants to activate a shvisa underneath that tree, somewhere underneath that tree. We don't know where, to the right, to the left, on the near side of the tree, the far side of the tree, we don't know. However, in any case, that entire tree was to be found within his boundary, within 2000. Therefore Shmuel says, look, it's irrelevant. Where underneath that tree, his shvisa will be activated, whether on the close side, on the far side, because in either case, it's a legitimate Eruv. It's within 2000. Now, since we don't know which side of the tree he has a shvisa, we must calculate accordingly. He must make sure that he takes into account, perhaps on the far side, and measure his tchum accordingly, perhaps on the near side, as we discussed yesterday. But in any case, we're speaking about a tree which is totally, entirely within his boundary. Therefore, there's no harm. But in this case, as Shmuel Hachamai Askinan, you know what we're speaking about? This price is referring to a case where part of the tree is out of his domain. His 2000 amma, actually it's 2004, because when a person establishes shvisa, he has 4, which is his personal space. In addition to that, he has a tchum of 2000. So Shmuel says this tree here was at the perimeter of his tchum, right at the boundary. From where he's standing until the trunk of the tree was exactly 2004 amas. That's the maximum. That's the end of his boundary. Therefore, since we're not sure where underneath that tree his shvisa was implemented, was it on the near side, which is within his territory, or perhaps it was on the far side, which is beyond his territory? Therefore, it doesn't work. There is a distance between where he's standing, Vadi Kori, up to the trunk of the tree. How much? Trei Alfi, 2004 amas. If that's the case, we have trouble. If we establish the shvisa on the far side of the tree, it's going to be situated outside of his boundary, and he can't acquire shvisa there. It's too far. He can't reach it. It's beyond his territory. That's why the Brisa says, so if he ensures that he's going to be specific, he specifies which 4 amis he'd like to have, meaning specifically within the boundary, within his territory, on the near side of the tree, Matzi Yazel. Then it works, he can walk there. But if he hasn't specified, Loi Matzi Yazel, he can't get there. Why? Because perhaps his shvisa was out of his territory. It was on the far side of the tree, which is beyond 2004 amis. This is a very specific case, and therefore it doesn't work. As opposed to the case in our Mishnah, where the entire tree was to be found within his boundary of 2004. So therefore, even in a worst case scenario, his shvisa was applied to the far side of the tree. That's okay, because that's also within his territory. Continues the Gemara. Tanakama said to Shmuel. Likewise, we have a Brisa in support of Shmuel, who maintains that when there's an uncertainty related to the activation of the Eruv, where exactly it is, we say it is activated nonetheless. Now, although it's activated, he'll still have to take into consideration all possibilities and draw his territories and his boundaries accordingly. But in any case, it does work. The Brisa says, Tov ir l'shtei ruchos. A person erroneously made a double Eruv. He's in a city, and he made an Eruv to Tzafain, he made an Eruv to Durham, thinking that it works. He erroneously thought that a person could place 2 Eruvs, one on either side of the city. Or perhaps he instructed his servants, go out and place an Eruv Tchumen on my behalf. And they both listened. One fellow placed an Eruv on his behalf on the Tzafan side of the city. The echad Eruv alav l'darim. The other servant placed an Eruv on his behalf to the Darim side of the city. So now he has a double Eruv, and there's a suffix. Which one is the legitimate one? Which one is the one that really works? And which one doesn't? So we say one of them works, we just don't know which one. So you must make sure that he keeps within the boundaries of both. Meaning, mahalach l'tzafin, kiruv l'darim. When he walks out of the city to tzafin, he must make sure that he stays within the boundary of the darim erev, because perhaps that's the legitimate one. Uladarim, likewise, when he walks out to darim, kiruv l'tzafin, he must make sure that he's within the territory of the tzafin erev. Perhaps that's the one that is his real erev. So, for instance, if he's in the city and the tzafin was placed 1,000 amas away, which allows him to walk 2,000 amas further and 2,000 amas back, and the darim likewise was placed 1,000 amas to the left of the city, which would allow him theoretically to walk another 2,000 that way and 2,000 back. So when he walks out of the city, he must make sure that he takes into consideration both possibilities. So when he walks to darim, he must make sure that he remains within the boundary of the tzafin erev, meaning he can't walk more than 1,000, which is the boundary of the tzafin erev. It's 2,000 amas from the tzafin erev. When he walks out to tzafin, he must do the same. He can only go up until 1,000, which is the 2,000 mark of the erev that was placed at darim. So one of them works, we just don't know which one. So he has to take into account all factors. The mitzvah of Satchum, let's say they really caused him trouble. They placed him right in between both tchumen, right in the middle of the boundary. So we have a city, and the tzafin erev was placed not 1,000 away, but 2,000 away, to the right of the city. We have the darim erev that was placed 2,000 amma in the other direction, and he's right in the middle. He's right in between both boundaries. In this case, he's really stuck. He can't move anywhere. He can't take a step in any direction, because just in case the erev to tzafin is a legitimate erev, so he's exactly at the 2,000 point, he can't walk anywhere to the other direction. He can't take a step to darim. Now perhaps it's not the tzafin erev that's working for him, rather it's the darim erev that's going to be activated. Now, since he's exactly at the 2,000 mark, is the edge of the boundary of that erev, he can only walk towards it, but he can't walk the other way. He can't walk towards tzafin. So he's stuck in the middle. He's in the middle of a tug of war. He can't walk to the right nor to the left. He has to take into account both possibilities. The mitzvah of Satchum, if they place him right in the middle of the two boundaries, lo yazim kame, he can't move out of his spot. He must remain right there. That's the Bryce. What do we see from here? We have a right to Shmuel. We have a uncertainty as to the exact location of a person's erev. We don't say, well, it's unspecified, nothing works. Rather, we say something does work. There's a suffix. Which one? And there's a right to Shmuel. It says more lema to have it yufta the Rav. Should perhaps this Bryce be a refutation on Rav, who says that an unspecified erev is ineffective? It says more Rav Tanu Polag. Rav has the status of a Tana. He lived between the Tanam and Roim, and he has the ability indeed to disagree with a Brysa. So certainly this Brysa is a right to Shmuel, and Rav disagrees. Okay, time for a review of today's daf. We began discussing the concept of kol she'enei b'zeh chaseh v'asach chaseh. When something can't be done incrementally, 1 + 1, then you can't do it even if it's both at once. We have 3 halachas that put that formula into question. Number 1, a person does an increased masarishan. We say something's been activated. How come? If you can't do it incrementally, how can you do it all at once? The Gemara says this is unique, because should he say, well, I want each kernel to be only partial ma'aser? That certainly works. So we accept what he said and we implement it in that manner. We take the large amount of ma'aser and we say, well, the appropriate amount is the only thing that becomes activated, and that gets distributed throughout the entire amount that he separated. We have the halacha that 2 animals came out as number 10. They're both kaddish. How does that work? Teretz is because by Ma'aser Behema we do find this concept of Bezeh Chazeh. We can have one Kedusha, and then another Kedusha, then another Kedusha. When there's some pasuk that we have multiple Kedushas by Ma'aser Behema, therefore, likewise when they come out both together at once, that multiple Kedusha will be activated. What about doing Shechita on the Toida with 80 Chalas? Chizkiah says 40 work. How does that work? You can't do 40 and be Mekadosh another 40 later. So how can you be Mekadosh when you bring 80 at once? The answer is, really, all he had in mind was to be Mekadosh 40. He brought the extra ones to safeguard himself, to go ahead and achrayas, to secure the 40 as a backup. And therefore, there's no contradiction whatsoever. He's only been Mekadosh 40 and no more. The Gemara concluded, in the case where the entire tree is only 7 amas wide, in which case we know with certainty regarding 1 amma in there, that's going to be his Malkan Shvisa. That's enough. That's called Miktzas Beis Nikar, part of his home, part of his residence has been specified and pointed out. Therefore, even Rav would agree that the Eruv is Kaina. Gemara concluded, in a case where the far side of the tree is beyond his reach, in this case, even Shmuel would agree, if he hadn't specified the exact location of his Malkan Shvisa, you can't rely on the Shvisa because perhaps the location of his Shvisa is out of bounds. It's beyond his territory. And therefore, this fellow cannot walk on Shabbos depending on this type of Erev.